Hello everyone, my name is Zenitsu, and I'm back with another episode of Spoiler Sundays. So this is the time of the week where I take a look at all of the Japanese news and spoilers and, well, talk about them. So we finally get to put a bow on BT11 with the last 9 cards getting spoiled this week, so let's just go over and talk about them. So first up, we have a new version of Ogremon, and this new version of Ogremon is a green level 4 Digimon that really isn't doing anything too much outside of trying to be an aggressive vanilla level 4. And the brand new version of Digitamamon also kind of mirrors that sentiment, where it's just trying to be an aggressive green level 5 Digimon, just having some slightly higher DP than your average level 5 Digimon, and Ogremon having slightly higher DP than your average level 4 Digimon. But because these are vanillas, there's a high likelihood that these cards won't be used at all. But something that actually could see some play is going to be a new version of Titemon. So Titemon, even though this new version isn't necessarily the greatest card in the world, he's not a bad card either, and the fact that he's going to be a level 6 in both purple and green means that you could play him in both of those strategies because, well, we've seen Titemon in purple before, and we've seen Titemon in green before. I think this is going to be more in line with how the purple one wants to play versus the green one, because the old green one that we got was just a vanilla card. But if you wanted to, you could still think about utilizing this card in a lot of green-based strategies just because it generically has the piercing ability. So this just allows us to be able to beat up into the opponent's Digimon and be able to deal damage, assuming our Digimon survives, which makes him just a pretty decent green level 6 to be using, on top of the fact that his secondary ability feeds into his first, where when we Digivolve up into him, we get to trash up to 3 cards from our hand, which is playing along with how the purple side wanted to do with just self-discard, and then we get to suspend one of the opponent's Digimon for each card we trashed. So there's that way to be able to set up our piercing ability ourselves, and then he has a third part to this ability to help make him even easier to use, where then we get to gain 1 memory for each of the opponent's suspended Digimon. So that just allows us to have a cheaper way to be able to utilize this card, and if the opponent has enough Digimon on the field, then he could be potentially free to Digivolve into, which is pretty tempo efficient, so that way we could use him in combination with some various level 7s to be able to try to turbo into our level 7, while also being able to beat up the opponent's Digimon and deal damage at the same time, on top of any discard-based synergies that we could be playing on the way, to be able to gain some extra bonuses with as well, making this Titemon a pretty interesting card to think about utilizing in the old Titemon-based strategy, or just trying to build a new deck around him. Next, we have a new version of Mamemon. So this new version of Mamemon is actually a pretty decent generic black tool for a lot of black decks to use, but obviously, based on all of the spoilers that we've seen, this kind of just wants to be played along with the Digimon-based deck. So what this card is doing is he has a nice on-play ability / when digivolving ability, where we get to reveal the top 5 cards of our deck. Then we get to play 1 Tamer card with a play cost of 4 or less from among them for free, which is pretty good considering it doesn't even specify what color it needs to be, so it could be any color Tamer that gets checked out of the top 5, and then the rest go to the top or bottom of the deck in any order. So if you do choose top, then they all have to go to the top. If you do choose bottom, then they'll all have to go to the bottom. And then this card has some extra flexibility on how we could use it, just because it could digivolve off of a level 4 green or black Digimon. So you also could think about utilizing this in the Tyrannomon based deck as well, as a good way to try to help set up your Tamers. And then on top of that, he has a nice inheritable ability for us to be using with our higher stages, where during your turn, once per turn, when another one of your Digimon is played by an effect, then one of your Digimon gains blocker until the end of the turn, so that way we have some nice defensive tools built in as well to try to help round out what that deck can possibly do. But this is still just a pretty decent generic black tool for not only just the Digimon deck, but for any deck that wants to play its Digimon by card effects and try to help set up its Tamers. Next up, we have Vemmon. So Vemmon is going to be the villain line that was introduced in Digimon World 3, and, well, it's kind of cool that he's getting a card form in this set. So what this card is doing is it's doing your classic villain thing, where you could include up to 50 copies of this card in your deck. So that just allows us to run a whole bunch of Vemmons, and Vemmon is kind of one of the core parts and pieces to how that deck is probably going to be functioning. And then what this card is doing outside of that is it's a Black level 3 Digimon that also has the main ability where we get to suspend this Digimon and then reveal the top 3 cards of our deck, add 1 Snatchmon, Destromon, Galacticmon, or Fusionize from among them into our hand, and then add 1 Vemmon from among them to the bottom of this Digimon's Digivolution source, and then the rest of the cards that go to the bottom of the deck in any order. So this is just going to be acting as the deck's dedicated digger to try to look for our parts and pieces to, well, be able to make the deck as playable as it possibly can be, on top of adding to its inheritable source to be able to use for its inheritable ability, where during your turn, once per turn, when this Digimon would Digivolve into a Destromon or Galacticmon, then we get to reduce its memory cost for the Digivolution by 1, so the fact that it can help set up itself to make our cards more playable is already pretty nice, but I'm sure there's going to be other ways to try to add these types of cards into our inheritable sources to be able to make playing our higher stages even more efficient. Next up, we have Snatchmon. So Snatchmon is going to be the level 4 in this evolution line, and Snatchmon seems to be also helping with the overall strategy on how this deck is going to be playing, just because its when Digivolving ability states that we get to place up to 2 Vemmons from our trash to the bottom of this Digimon's Digivolution source. So it's adding, again, to our inheritable sources, so that way we could use our Vemmons to reduce the Digivolution cost of our level 6s to make them even more efficient to play. And then on top of that, if this card has 4 or more Vemmons in its Digivolution source, then we get to return 1 Fusionize from our trash to our hand. So that way we could try to reuse Fusionize for whatever that card is going to be doing. And then on top of that, he has a nice inheritable ability where during all turns once per turn, when we return a Vemmon from this Digimon's Digivolution source to the bottom of the deck, then we get to unsuspend this Digimon, and this Digimon gains the blocker ability until the end of the opponent's turn. So it basically just allows us to either use this ability to be extra aggressive with or defensive with, to be able to set up a blocker while trying to chip at the opponent's security, or just try to use the unsuspend part to double attack. So the ideal way that the deck seems to want to set up Snatchmon is you're going to use Vemmon's ability to be able to add an inheritable source into him already. Then when we Digivolve into Snatchmon, there's already going to be 2 Vemmons, and then his ability is going to be adding another 2 to be able to use the when Digivolving ability to its utmost potential, allowing us to reuse that Fusionize. And speaking of Fusionize, it's going to be a pretty decent card for this deck to use, just because it's already going to be a cheap and efficient option card already, costing 1 in black, but it actually could help it reduce its play cost even more by 1 if we have a Snatchmon already on our field. So the fact that Snatchmon wants to grab back this card allows us to then be able to use this card for 0, which is just pretty efficient and powerful for us to use, because this card wants to be setting up our higher stage Digimon because of its main ability, where it allows us to place 1 Vemmon or Destromon from our trash to the bottom of this Digimon's Digivolution source, and then 1 of our Digimon may Digivolve into Destromon or Galacticmon from our trash by paying its Digivolution cost, so that way we could try to make our higher level Digimon as efficient to play as we possibly can, having alternative ways to be able to Digivolve into them, which is just pretty good considering that we already know that Snatchmon already wants us to be able to grab back this card, so the fact that we could then start using this card to Digivolve from the trash just allows us to always be able to use and reuse our cards as effectively as we possibly can. Then it has a nice security ability where we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck, play 1 Vemmon from among them for free, and then trash the rest, so that way we're A, setting up our trash, and B, getting a Vemmon on our field to be able to start our evolutionary chains with. And then, speaking of our evolutionary chains, next we have the level 5 in the form of Destromon. So Destromon is a pretty powerful level 5, and he's ordinarily a little bit more on the expensive side compared to your usual level 5 Digimon, evoing for 5 on top of a level 4 and having 10,000 DP, which is pretty expensive, but again, the deck has alternative ways to try to help reduce his evolution cost or make him a little bit more playable. Then, on top of that, he has an alternative Digivolution condition that's acting as a good warp, where we could Digivolve him for 6 on top of a Vemmon, so at worst, if we just have a Vemmon on our field, we're going to be able to utilize our higher stages with right away for a slightly higher cost. Then he has a nice when digivolving ability where we get to reveal the top 3 cards of our deck. We get to place one Vemmon from among them to the bottom of this Digimon's Digivolution source, and then we get to trash the rest. And if this Digimon has 5 or more Vemmons in its Digivolution source, then we get to delete one of the opponent's Tamers. So this is pretty good because, well, we need more Tamer hate, and, well, this is a good card to hate on Tamers by having an actual way to be able to delete them. So this is going to be a pretty good card just for that aspect alone, and it's not necessarily the hardest thing in the world for this deck to be able to set up 5 Vemmons, because if we're just going by base evolution line, ideally, Vemmon is going to suspend himself, put a Vemmon underneath him, so that way when we Digivolve into Snatchmon, we'll add 2 more Vemmons underneath, and then he's going to add the 5th Vemmon that way. So it's not necessarily super hard to be able to line up his when Digivolving ability. And then on top of that, he has a nice inheritable ability, where during the opponent's turn, once per turn, when an opponent's Digimon attacks, by returning 2 Vemmons from one of our Galacticmon's Digivolution sources to the bottom of the deck, then we get to change the attack to this Digimon, acting as a pseudo-blocker to help redirect the attacks to be able to have some good defensive plays. And then the last card of the set and last secret rare is going to be Galacticmon himself. So Galacticmon is going to be the big level 6 in that evolutionary line, and he is stat-wise a pretty strong level 6 compared to a lot of others. So he natively has 14,000 DP, and he evos for 6 on top of a level 5 black Digimon, ideally our Destromon. And then on top of that, he has the alternative Digivolution condition, where we could Digivolve him for 9 on top of a Snatchmon, which is going to be our level 4, so that way we have more ways to be able to play this card, just because we know that Snatchmon wants to grab back our option, and our option wants us to be able to Digivolve into this card from our trash. So there's just a whole lot of good synergy on trying to make this card as playable as possible from virtually any stage. And then on top of that, he has 3 built-in abilities. His first ability is a when Digivolving ability, where we get to place up to 4 Vemmons from our trash to the bottom of this Digimon's Digivolution source. So we already know that the Vemmons are going to be acting as material to be used for various different abilities and trigger various different abilities. So having a good way to built-in set that up is pretty nice. And then on top of that, if this Digimon has 8 or more Vemmons in its Digivolution source, which if we're Digivolving all the way up our chains, isn't going to be the hardest thing in the world to gain, then we get to delete one of the opponent's Digimon outright, so it's just acting as some good built-in removal for having enough Vemmons in his inheritable source, which he's helping set up himself. Then, on top of that, his secondary ability states that during all turns, when this Digimon would leave play, you may prevent him from leaving play by returning 4 Vemmons from this Digimon's Digivolution source to the bottom of our deck. And then on top of that, his third ability is a really powerful passive where at the start of your main phase, we get to trash the top card of the opponent's security stack, acting as some good passive burn to try to slowly chip away at the opponent, and this would stack with multiple Galacticmons, so the more Galacticmons that you have on the field, then the more you're going to be burning the opponent, and that kind of seems like the way the deck wants to be built, is to be passively aggressive, where you're just slowly going to chip at the opponent to unsuspend this Digimon to gain blocker off of our Snatchmon, and then utilize the fact that he's going to be trying to stick around, so that way he could burn the opponent's security, and once they get low enough on security, then we just have easy ways to be able to aggress and take the game that way. So it looks like he's going to be making a pretty powerful and interesting deck to be able to play. That's another villain-based deck. But all in all, I'm pretty excited for how this set is shaping up. I don't necessarily think it's going to be like the most power creep set that we've ever had. It seems like a lot of these cards are good complements to what we've already had before, and I kind of like all of these new updates, and even the new decks don't necessarily seem overtly overpowered compared to some of the decks that we currently have. So it's going to try to create a nice blend or mix of possible decks to be able to play in BT11. So that's all I really have for this video. As always, feel free to tell me your thoughts down in the comments below, and down in the description below are a couple of different ways you could support me and the channel. So I do have a TCG Player affiliate link, so when you use that link to buy cards off of TCG Player, then some of that money will go to supporting me and the channel. I also do make and sell playmats over on Overcard Gamers on Facebook, so when you buy a playmat with my design, then some of that money will also go to help supporting me and the channel. And on top of all of that, I do have a Twitch account over on twitch.tv/Zenitsu, so giving me a follow and a subscription also helps support me there, and I do play Digimon on top of various other games on that platform as well. So thank you everyone for watching, and as always, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more content, and I'll see you in the next video.